In 1959, Piper was losing the war for America's skies. Cessna had the flashiest, best-selling metal planes money could buy. So, faced with bankruptcy, Piper's designers were ordered to do the unthinkable: abandon beauty, slash costs, and build a wing so simple that pilots called it too ugly to fly. Yet today, that so-called flying brick has outlasted nearly every rival, saving students, surviving disasters, and upending everything the experts claimed about strength and safety. Why did Piper's brutal, square invention become aviation's immortal survivor, and what made its ugly secret unstoppable? The answer begins with a crisis that nearly ended Piper forever. Piper's leadership gathered around the numbers, and the numbers were ugly. Cessna's new 172 wasn't just a hit, it was rewriting the rules of the market. In 1958, Cessna shipped over 1,600 airplanes, with the 172 taking a bigger slice of the trainer market every month. Piper, still clinging to its old tri-pacer, managed to move about 4,500 units that year, but the writing was on the wall. The tri-pacer's tube and fabric body looked ancient next to Cessna's smooth, all-aluminum skin. Flight schools and private buyers wanted modern, metal airplanes. Cessna's sales climbed 36% in a single year, while Piper's growth barely scraped double digits. The gap was more than numbers. Cessna's 172 was easy to fly, easy to maintain, and most important, it looked like the future. Meanwhile, Piper's inventory of unsold tri-pacers started piling up. The market didn't care that Piper could build more planes overall. The only thing that mattered was what pilots wanted to buy next. By 1959, the Cessna 172 alone was grabbing nearly a third of the four-seat trainer market, while Piper's share in that segment shrank to about 20%. Every month, another flight school switched over. Every month, another dealer called Lockhaven asking for something new. Inside Piper, the pressure was suffocating. The company had just opened a new plant in Vero Beach, Florida, hoping a fresh start would bring fresh ideas. But the truth was simple. If Piper couldn't match Cessna's metal construction and modern looks, it would be left behind. The old ways weren't just outdated, they were a threat to survival. Piper's engineers weren't told to build a better airplane. They were told to build a cheaper one, faster, with fewer parts and less waste. The only chance left was to gamble everything on a design that could be stamped out by the thousands, without the cost or complexity of Cessna's elegant wing. The order was clear: forget tradition, forget pride. Find a way to beat Cessna at their own game, or watch Piper fade into history. The order landed on the desks at Vero Beach with no room for poetry. Piper's leadership wanted numbers, not dreams. The directive was blunt: build a modern, all-metal airplane that could be produced faster and cheaper than anything Cessna could stamp out. It had to be rugged enough for student pilots, simple enough for the assembly line, and affordable enough to keep the company afloat. No one asked for beauty, they asked for survival. Fred Weick and John Thorpe took that mandate and stripped it down. They gathered their team, Carl Berge, Bob Lipinski, Henry Holtier, and hammered out what mattered. Every part had to earn its place. If a curve did not make the plane cheaper or stronger, it was gone. If a step in the process slowed the line, it was out. The design brief fit on one page: minimum parts, maximum speed, absolute reliability. Build an airplane for the real world, a world where planes get battered, students make mistakes, and every hour of labor cuts into the bottom line. Thorpe, in particular, refused to be seduced by tradition. He believed in the economy of manufacturing above all. He saw that every time a rib changed size, every time a part needed a new die, the clock and the cost ticked up. He wanted a wing that could be punched out like cookies, identical, interchangeable, and fast. Weick, an aerodynamicist by training, understood the trade-offs but backed the logic. The team's mantra became repetition. One die, one process, one wing after another rolling down the line. The specs called for all-metal construction, tricycle gear, and a cabin that could take a beating. But the real heart of the brief was invisible. Make it so simple that nothing could break it, and so cheap that Piper could sell it to every flight school in the country. It was not about building a plane that soared on magazine covers. It was about building a plane that would never leave the shop floor waiting on parts. The engineers went to work, not with sketches of birds or dreams of speed, but with a stopwatch and a ledger. The only elegance allowed was the kind you could measure in hours saved and dollars kept in the company's pocket. The first time the prototype rolled out onto the ramp, it didn't turn heads, it snapped necks. The wing was a rectangle, fat and flat, with no taper and no apology. From above, it looked like a candy bar glued to the side of a fuselage. The nickname started almost instantly, the Hershey Bar. Not a compliment, just a jab at its blocky shape and Pennsylvania roots. The aviation press had a field day. One columnist called it a barn door with delusions of flight. Another said it looked like a diving board waiting to snap. In the world of aviation, beauty was supposed to mean performance. The idea that a wing could be this plain, this blunt, and still belong in the sky felt almost like an insult. Engineers and pilots lined up to take shots. They said the rectangular wing would drag like an anchor. They warned it would bleed speed, sap fuel, and turn every flight into a slow crawl. "It's too ugly to fly," one magazine sneered. "It'll fall out of the sky before it ever sells." The Hershey Bar wing became a punchline at trade shows and hangar meetings. Piper's competitors, Cessna and Mooney, smirked from the sidelines, convinced that nobody would trade a sculpted tapered wing for something that looked stamped out by a lunch lady. But while the critics obsessed over aesthetics, the real story was happening on the factory floor. Every rib in that wing was identical. No curves, no changes in size, no wasted time. One die, one press, one process. Piper could bang out wings by the dozen, while Cessna's assembly lines stopped to swap tooling for every new rib. In the end, the Hershey Bar wasn't just a shape, it was a challenge. It dared the industry to measure value in hours saved and parts simplified, not in the shine of a leading edge. The controversy wasn't just about looks. It was about what mattered more, the opinion of a magazine or the cold logic of production numbers. Every airplane wing starts life as a stack of ribs, each one a skeleton giving shape and strength to the skin. In most factories that means a parade of dies and forms, every rib a little different from the last. Tapered wings demand it. The root rib is thick, the next one thinner, the next thinner still, all the way to the tip. 10 ribs, 10 shapes, 10 setups. The presses slow down, the costs pile up. Cessna's wing was a craftsman's puzzle, beautiful but fussy. Piper's answer was blunt. Make every rib identical. No taper, no fancy curves. One die, one press. The same rib punched out 100 times a day, sliding down the line like cookies from a cutter. The tooling bill dropped to a single line item. Workers did not need to swap out dies or chase down special parts. If you broke a rib, you grabbed another from the same bin. The line kept moving. On the books, that meant a Cherokee wing could be built in half the time it took to assemble a Cessna wing. Every hour saved on the floor was an hour Piper could spend building the next airplane. Dealers got deliveries sooner, and flight schools could count on spare parts showing up in days, not weeks. There is an archival memo from Vero Beach that spells it out. One die, infinite ribs. The accountants loved it. The engineers called it heresy, but the proof was in the output. By the time a Cessna wing was ready for skinning, Piper's line had already finished another set. The Hershey Bar wing was not just a shape, it was an assembly line weapon. Every rib was a vote for survival. In a world where time was money, Piper's cookie-cutter ribs were the difference between going broke and staying in the sky. Under the floor of every Cherokee sits a piece of metal that does not care about opinions. It is the carry-through spar, a hollow aluminum beam, thick-walled and wide, running from one side of the cabin to the other. Most pilots never see it, but every mechanic knows it by feel. When you crawl under the seats, you can knock on it like a bridge girder. That's not decoration, that's the backbone. The spar does not just hold the wings on, it takes every shock, every bounce, every bad landing from a nervous student. In a Cessna, stress travels up through the wing struts and into the cabin roof, a web of parts sharing the load. But in the Cherokee, the wing's force goes straight into the spar under your feet. The cabin rides along, a passenger in its own airplane. The skin on top is no afterthought either. Piper used aluminum thick enough that a grown man can walk out onto the wing to check the fuel or drop a wrench without leaving a mark. Try that on a Cessna and you'll be patching dents before lunch. The Cherokee's wing is more sidewalk than sculpture. It is built to take punishment, not just to look good on a sales brochure. Every certificate diagram, every engineering drawing points to the same truth. This is not a bird's wing, it is a bridge. The I-beam underfoot does not flex, does not flinch, and does not care about elegance. It cares about getting you home, even when you treat it rough. The first thing you learn as a flight instructor is that students will surprise you, and not in the good way. They freeze on the controls, yank the yoke at the worst moment, or flare too high and drop the airplane like a sack of bricks. In a Cherokee, that is not a death sentence. The gear absorbs the blow, the spar shrugs it off, and the wing, well, the wing just keeps flying. One afternoon, a rookie pilot stalled out on final. Instead of spinning, the Cherokee gave him a warning, an unmistakable shudder as the airflow broke loose at the root. The nose dipped, the aileron still answered, and the airplane simply nodded its head, refusing to roll. He walked away rattled, but alive. That is no accident. The rectangular wing stalls at the root first, right next to the fuselage, so the pilot feels the buffet before anything gets out of hand. The tips, where the ailerons live, stay in clean air. You can still bank, still recover, even as the rest of the wing says, enough. Countless Cherokees have survived landings that would have bent a Cessna in half. The oleo struts compress, the spar takes the load, and the slab wing refuses to quit. For every hard landing, there is a story like that. An instructor who watched a student make every mistake in the book, and a Cherokee that forgave all of them. That is why flight schools kept buying them. Not for beauty, not for speed, but because they made sure the student got another chance. In 1974, Piper made a move that left old-timers shaking their heads. The company rolled out the Warrior, a Cherokee with a new semi-tapered wing, sleeker, a little longer, and shaped to look more like what the market expected from a modern airplane. The wingspan stretched out by about 2 feet, and the tip finally shed the blunt rectangle. This was not just engineering, it was a response to pressure from dealers, buyers, and the aviation press. For years, the slab wing had taken its share of abuse. Now, Piper's sales team wanted a product that looked like progress. The aerodynamicists promised a touch more efficiency and a bit smoother ride, but the real reason was image. A flying magazine columnist put it plainly, nobody wants to park the ugly one out front. Piper's own records show a dip in Cherokee sales leading up to the change. The slab wing had proven itself in the field, but on the sales floor, appearance started to matter as much as performance. The decision to taper the wing was not about weakness, it was about keeping up with the times, even if it meant leaving a little bit of honesty behind. There is a battered Cherokee 140 out there with more than 20,000 hours on its logbook. The paint is gone. The seats are patched, the yoke has been gripped by 1,000 nervous hands. But the slab wing is still straight, the spar still solid, and the ribs still interchangeable. That is not an accident. That is the proof. Cessnas from the same year are sitting in museums or stripped for parts, but this old Hershey Bar is still getting its annual inspection, still teaching new pilots to fly. Every dent tells a story. Every patch is a badge of honor. That wing, mocked for being plain and dismissed as a shortcut, became the backbone of a generation. The market always wants shiny and new, but the survivors are the ones that take a beating and come back for more. So next time you walk the ramp and spot that square slab in the rain, remember what it stands for. Are you with the pretty shapes or with the survivor? Team taper or team slab? Pick your side. Today, flight schools still seek out the old slab-wing Cherokees, not for their looks, but for their record, 32,000 built and still flying worldwide. When simplicity survives where elegance fails, it's a reminder. Real safety comes from honest strength, not surface beauty. In an industry chasing the next sleek upgrade, the survivor's lesson is clear. Sometimes, ugly saves lives. Which would you trust? Drop your answer in the comments.